In this demonstration, we'll be creating an image similar to what we're seeing on screen here, and the primary element that I want to share with you today is the clipping path and creating some warp with the text tools. There's two distinct ways you can create warps in Photoshop. There's more than two, but there are two very distinct ways, and I'm going to share that with you today. You should have already downloaded this file here called Leaves, and it looks like this when you start. Okay, and that's what we're going to build upon. So just open that file and immediately do a save as, and I'll start another file here. And I'm just going to go to my Photoshop stuff here, digital imagery, and save it as last name, lesson number. And I believe this is lesson number 8B, but if that changes, just make it whatever the lesson number of the day is. And very importantly at the bottom, choose Photoshop. Okay. That way you don't wreck. Oh, it looks like I have one of this name already. So let me just go BB. All right. Of course, my finished file is already named that. There we go. Okay. That way you're not wrecking your original source file, and you have a new file that actually exists, and you can just save as you go now. So let's jump back to the finished version here. I'll just talk about a few things that help make this up. Again, I started with this file with the leaves. Now I'm using what's called a clipping path or a clipping mask. And the idea of that is that it does mask, it creates a mask based on the shape of pixels in a layer. And in this case, I'm using my text layer as the clipping path. And what it does is that it just hides or just shows whatever is on the layer above inside of its own shape, and otherwise it masks the rest out. So for example, if I go to my text tool here, now again, remember this one is finished, but I can double click on the text and it's still live text, and I can just change that if I wanted to, like that. Okay. I'm just going to go back to my move tool here. And you'll notice too that I have a couple of layer effects applied to it, a bevel and emboss, a drop shadow. I have a layer called color. What I've done is I've duplicated the leaves layer, brought it to the bottom. I actually inverted the color, and that's just, the color choice I'll leave up to you, I guess. But I inverted it and then superimposed a color on a layer above. And if I click on that layer, I'm currently using the blend mode called multiply. But if I go through these, you can see an array of different options that could be cool. Okay, but I decided on the one called multiply to create this specific aqua colored effect, if you will. Okay, so let's just go back to the original file here and we'll start from scratch. All right, so I'll just start by typing. I'm going to just toggle these colors to black and white and make white the foreground color, and I'm going to go to the text tool and just type in the word hello, like that. And if I want to make it bigger, which I do, I can see all my formatting up at the very top here. It's also partially available in this shortcut bar as well. But I'm going to start by selecting all the text. I triple clicked. And I'm a little old school, so I'm going to use the bar at the top here. And I know that if I scroll over the text icon, I can click and drag left or right to decrease or increase the size. That's my quickest way. And I can see the numbers. If I needed a specific number, I could just type it in. So I'll make it fairly large, about that big. And you see, I have used a very bold font before I started the video. I had impact set here. It is centered, and it is set to white. I'm just going to go, actually just show you on the text tool that once that text is generated, you can see how it's an I-beam. I can go in and select part or all of the text and edit it. And I can also, if I'm careful, if I move my cursor, it seems like if I go around the edges and find the bottom line, I can actually move that around while I'm still in the text tool. Of course, if I'm out of the text tool, I can always do this with the move tool. But as a shortcut, it's available if you just find that happy spot. Look for the 4 arrows cursor, and I find that it seems to be over here on either side of the line. On older versions, you'll find it at the bottom, in fact, but I noticed here that it's not in the bottom. This is the 2024 version I'm working on. Okay, so I'm just going to put it into place here, like that. Okay, and I'm happy with that. And why don't we save? There we go. Okay, step one, I generated a layer with content on it. The positive pixels, of course, is the text, and the clear pixels, well, there's no pixels, but it's clear behind if I show you here, like that. Okay, so the way that this works is with a clipping path is it will clip or it will mask the elements of the layer above it. So I have to move this background layer above the hello layer. So I will turn it back on here and I will unlock it. Okay, then I'm just going to drag it above like that. Now, of course, it's hidden the text layer. I can right click and go create clipping mask. It's a little below the projector here, but there is a selection called create clipping mask. Now the other way to do it is to hold your Alt key down on your PC or your Option key down on the Mac and carefully go across the intersection of the two layers, top to bottom. You'll see that little arrow pointing down. That is your keyboard shortcut, Alt click or Option click on the Mac. I click it, boom, there's our clipping mask. Okay, you can right click as well to generate it, but I noticed that my submenu was going below the projector here. Now what it will do as an icon will show a little side arrow pointing down, and that's your clipping mask. You can get out of it as well the same way. Hold your Option key down on the Mac or your Alt key down on the PC, and you got to find that happy spot. So you go slow, move your cursor, and here it says remove, and I've just removed it. Okay. Again, right click. I'll do the right click even though you can't see it. Create clipping mask. Same idea. And right click, I can release it as well. Release clipping mask. Okay, so that's the clipping mask in a nutshell. So I'm going to reapply it. I'm going to use the Alt click between the layers method. There we go. Now here's the nice thing about this kind of a mask. Let me highlight the text layer. With my move tool, watch what happens when I move it. It's acting like a window, right? That upper layer is solid in place, but it's acting like a window. So I can actually move it around here and capture different parts of those leaves on the upper layer. Okay, so again, the pixels act as a mask, and they allow what's above to show through. The clear areas don't allow what's above to show through. So it's a different kind of mask using layers versus a mask layer per se. All right. The nice thing about this, especially with text, is that it remains editable. So I can double click my icon here to highlight all the text, and I can type in a whole new word like that. There we go. I can also, of course, double or triple click on the text on the screen and edit it that way. Hello. Okay. So let me go back to my move tool here. So in a nutshell, that's your clipping mask. Okay. So let's take this a step further and do some warping. And then after I do the warp, we'll just kind of dress up the rest of the background, if you will. So to do a warp, like I said, there's two distinct methods. We can use the text tool for the warp. Select the text. It just has to be clicked on. It doesn't have to be highlighted. If you look at the top in my properties, there's a little T with a curve under it. Create warp text. That's going to call up a separate little window, and we have an array of different shapes that we can warp this to. Unfortunately, this doesn't preview when I roll over it, but you can tell sort of by the description what they're going to do. So if I pick arch, of course it arches like that. Then you have your properties here where I can control the bend and distortion like that. Okay, and I can distort vertically as well to kind of create some fake perspective, I guess. Okay, like that. All right, let me just bring this back in a bit here. There we go. And I'll stick with the arch for now. Click OK. If you want to release it, you just go back in, click it again, go back in here and choose none. Okay, and that releases the arch. So that's one distinct method. Actually, I'll leave it off here and show you the other method. I'll click OK anyway on the none. And I can, of course, go down to type, warp text. That's virtually the same thing that I just showed you, though. Calls up that same menu. Okay. But the distinct other method is if we go to edit, transform, warp. You can see here I've got arc. If I choose arch, I can actually do some changes up here in the properties, if you will. This one happens to have a handle on it. They don't all have a handle, but this is nice and organic. Okay, and that again was through edit, transform, warp. Okay, and there are a lot of parameters here. You can see here I can click on the different angles. I can go horizontal or vertical and have some fun with it. Okay, yeehaw. There you go. All right, so there's a little bit of a warp using the transform tool. And of course you can use the numbers as well. And you could mess with some of these other settings. I invite you to have some fun with it. I'm going to, let's see here, I think this one here. And we'll live with that. And if I click on another tool, you know, it accepts it. And I can still move that around, of course. If I wanted to edit it, I would just call it up again through edit, transform, warp. And it calls up that grid, and I can make my edits. Okay, so that's the essence of the lessons I wanted to show you today. Let's just dress this up a little bit. So I'm just going to duplicate this layer and bring it to the bottom. I can go right click, copy layer, or copy. Duplicate layer. Okay, layer 0 copy, like that. Now I am going to come up here and release that clipping mask on that new layer, and then drag it to the bottom. Okay, now everything seems invisible right now because of course it's over its same texture, if you will. Okay, so I'm just going to invert this image. There's a quick invert command. It's Command I on the Mac and I believe Control I on the PC, but it's also under Image, Adjustments. Here we go, invert. Okay, and that gives me the opposite colors. Therefore now, of course, it's going to provide a lot of contrast. So I can read that masked word, if you will, using the clipping mask. Okay. And just to make this a little nicer, why don't I go back and just add a new layer up above there. And I'm going to fill it with a baby blue. I've decided I want to change this color to like an aqua. So I'm going to go edit fill. 100% foreground color, normal. And of course it blots it out, but with that layer I'm going to use my blend modes, and I'm just going to use multiply. Okay, so I've got this nice kind of blue going on in the background. It's still contrast, but it's not as harsh. And I'm going to, as a last thing, I'm going to decorate my text. I'm going to highlight the text layer, and I'm going to put a couple effects. I'll call up the bevel and emboss. And let's see here. I was messing around with it, so I kind of have it on the settings that I want. I made the highlights lighter, like that. And of course, you can mess with the size and soften it. I have it very sharp. I have soften set to 0, so it's very chiseled looking. A depth, of course, that's again how extreme it's going to be on the edges. And let's see here. I guess that's it for that. I'm going to also add a drop shadow. So I can just click on drop shadow down here and then select that. And I'm going to change the nature of the lighting. Now it's on global light, which means that will affect all the effects. And I just changed it to an upper left light source. And the shadow is being projected accordingly. And my highlights and my bevels are also projecting that same light source. Okay, so you're invited to play with some of these settings, but I'm going to click it OK as is. And now I have a nice bevel and emboss and a drop shadow. I definitely want to save this, and I should have been saving more often. So that's our assignment for today. The two main things were the clipping mask, and then two different ways to distort the text using the warp feature. One built into the text tool, one built into the edit transform feature. Okay. And that's our lesson on warping text and creating clipping masks.